Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my final regular season game preview of the year. We are almost to the end of what has been an incredible season for Boise State football. The first time that they have a chance to finish the year 11-1 in the regular season since 2019 and then 2011 before that. This is a chance for Boise State to finish out the year with a historic mark on the offing if they can finish out the right way. This is going to be an incredible atmosphere. Boise State versus Oregon State on the blue, noon Eastern, so 10 a.m. Mountain Central Time kickoff on Fox. Millions of eyes watching this game to see how Boise State finishes this season and can they finish it strong. Now, however, across from them is an Oregon State team who is not going away this year. They had an opportunity. They were on a 5-game skid. They could have wrapped it up and thrown it away and just looked forward to next year. But they decided last week to go out and pull off a massive upset versus Washington State. The game I've lost. I don't think a lot of people saw coming there for Washington State. And Oregon State now is 1 win away from bowl eligibility, even with everything that's happened in the season, even with all of the injuries and all the adversity that they have gone through this year. They are now 1 game away from bowl eligibility. And the only problem is that Boise State's that team that's standing in their way. But they have a chance here on national television to make a statement at the end of the season. Of course, every team that Boise State has played so far down the stretch has certainly realized the opportunity that they have and has taken full advantage of it. And Boise State has stubbed their toe on a few of these games, but they haven't fallen yet. Oregon State is a program that Boise State cannot just simply wipe away and ignore. This is a team that Boise State's definitely going to have to take seriously coming into this game, and we're going to get into that in this preview. We're going to talk about the series history between these two teams. This is a budding rivalry type game. I'm going to coin the term the Battle of the Blue and Orange, just going off the primary school colors since nobody else has coined one yet. But this is a budding rivalry type game, a regional rivalry for sure. A team that Boise State's going to be playing on the regular. Definitely a lot of back and forth between Boise State fans and Oregon State fans for sure, whether you're seeing that on Twitter or on Facebook, if it's the Mountain West Conference Alliance Facebook group or somewhere else. There's definitely been a lot of back and forth, not so much at the back end of the season that Oregon State has had somewhat of a downhill trend that kind of got quieter there towards back end, but definitely preseason, early on in the season. This has rivalry type feelings going into this game. So we're going to go through the series history so far between these two teams. We'll look at the key players, both Boise State and Oregon State. So, hey, Oregon State fans watching, there's something in here for you as well. We're going to go through the keys to the game for Boise State, and then we'll summarize at the end and put in a score prediction. So that brings it to the best part of all the video. So any new viewers watching, this is your opportunity to be part of the video here. Go in and put your score predictions in the comments below. The person who gets the closest score prediction will get a shout out in my review video. If multiple people get the score prediction right, I'll shout out everybody that gets it exactly right. So go in and put your score predictions and add in any additional analysis, thoughts you have on the game, general excitement, concerns, worries, whatever it is that you want to talk about, put it in the score predictions below. Now, before I get into the real preview part of this video, I did want to say something real quick, because you heard me say that this is on the edge of a historic season. This is on the edge of being a historic season for Boise State. And it is already an historic season. And their FBS history, this is the first time that Boise State has lost 6 games the previous year and then followed that up with a 10-win season the next year. Boise State's already at 10 wins right now. How many of us watching last season, even the 2 seasons before that, and going all the way back to 2020, how many of us would have expected what has happened this year, and how many of us would have loved to have been a part of the season that we're having this year, the past previous years? I think every single one of us would have been blown away to realize the success that this team has had. However, if you were to approach this from an outside perspective and have no idea about the actual record of Boise State, you didn't know what any of the game results had been, you were purely judging the season off of a lot of the comments and reactions of Bronco Nation, whether, again, that's on Twitter or Facebook, or even in the comments of some of these videos, you would perhaps get the impression that this was a disappointing year. You would perhaps get the impression that this was a team that wasn't headed for one of the biggest games potentially on the back end postseason opportunities here in school history. Maybe that they were even barely going to be bowl eligible based on some of the impressions, and that everything, all the excitement, all the incredible things that Boise State has done this year. And it hasn't just been Ashton Jeanty, even though he has certainly been exciting, but even though it hasn't just been him, all the incredible exciting things seem to go under the radar for some fans. And the only thing that can be focused on is quarterback issues or secondary issues or special teams issues. And again, it's fair to analyze, it's fair to critique, it's fair to raise concerns, but you got to do it fairly, which means you have to recognize and also bring up the incredible things that Boise State has done. You have to focus on those at the same time that you're also focusing on some negatives. And guess what? All those negatives, while some of them may be valid, the truth is Boise State has won. They have won, and they have won again. And maybe it hasn't been pretty, but they have won. And there are a lot of teams in college football right now who cannot say that, especially after this last weekend. And so as we come down this final stretch, before again we get into this actual game preview part here, my call to Bronco Nation is to continue to rally around this team, because they have put everything on the line and they have produced a historic season. No matter what happens from here on out, they have produced a historic season for Boise State, and Bronco Nation needs to let them know that they recognize that and that they're excited for what the future holds for this program. So let's get into the series history. Before we do that, just some notes. Friday, 10 a.m., like I said, on Fox, Boise State is favored, 20.5 point favorites in this game, and heavily favored by ESPN as well, given a 91.7% chance of winning. Now, however, series history, at least from the just looking at it at face value, does not favor Boise State. Oregon State does hold a 6-4 advantage in this series history. However, when you start examining that series history, the first two games were when Boise State was in the FCS. First win, big one, 34-3, 1986. Big Oregon State plays a little FCS team, Boise State, and crushes them. Next year, though, not next year, a few years later, in 1989, next meeting between these two teams, it was not an easy win. Still a win in the FCS era, but FCS Boise State came within a touchdown of beating Oregon State, 37-30. And then 2003, Boise State, first FBS meeting, they came oh so very close to winning that game, 26-24. And for any of the older fans out there who remember that game, you will remember that Oregon State went for it on 4th and inches, a diving attempt for the conversion by the quarterback for Oregon State, where the ball was knocked loose, fumbled it. Boise State gets the ball. They now have it with several minutes left on the clock and a chance to get down, and all they need is a field goal to win it. And the referees called forward progress. You can watch the highlight. It is clear, the replay. You can clearly see no forward progress, that the ball gets knocked out before the quarterback while he's coming forward. The ball going backwards is not forward progress. Clearly a bad call. Boise State ends up losing that game. However, referees couldn't do anything to help Oregon State in 2004, and Boise State beat the socks off of them 34-53. Oregon State would then get the next win in the series, a close one, 30-27 in 2005. A disappointing season overall for Boise State there. But then 2006, the very next year, Boise State, behind one of the best running backs in program history, a running back who Ashton Jeanty has been chasing records all season long. Ian Johnson destroys Oregon State 14-42, 240 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns by Ian Johnson. And then 2010, Boise State goes and now on the blue this time, another big matchup on the blue, both teams ranked. Boise State wins that one 24-37. Then in 2013, Oregon State would get another win in the series. Now at this point, they had just lost Chris Peterson, and this was a team that was being coached by the special teams coordinator, and Boise State ended up losing that game 38-23 with an interim head coach. But then 2016, Boise State and Jeremy McNichols would get back on track. A huge win, 24-38, 208 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, trying to be a little bit of Ian Johnson-esque there. And then 2022, of course, Oregon State getting the last win in the series. So again, if you look at series history, Oregon State owns this 6-4. However, if you're counting just FBS wins, it's actually tied 4-4. And if you take out a win against an interim head coach in a bowl game, well, then it's 3-4 with Boise State winning. It's owning the lead. So at the very least, FBS only, this is a tied series, and really in real matchups and regular season matchups with your head coach actually coaching, your real head coach coaching, it's 3-4 Boise State. But either way, Boise State with an opportunity here to reset the clock after a not great showing in 2022 when Taylor Green was still with Boise State, and so was Hank Bachmeier. This is an opportunity for Boise State to reset the clock and have a chance of coming back and setting themselves in the right position moving into the Pac-12. The new Pac-12 is going to be reformed here in a couple of years. So key players for Boise State and Oregon State. Starting off the bat with Boise State, we got Ashton Jeanty, of course. Ashton Heisman Jeanty for Boise State. 2,062 yards rushing, 7.5 yard average, 27 touchdowns. He's also had 18 receptions for 102 yards. He is the first Boise State running back to rush for over 2,000 yards in a season, which is an incredible accomplishment considering all the amazing running backs that have come through Boise State. So he is going to have a big game. He needs to have a big game for Boise State to win because that's Boise State's offense runs through him. But at the same time, this is one of his last few chances, really, to make a major statement on the national stage. He'll get another chance in the Mountain West Championship game, of course. But this is one of those few last big-time opportunities for him to make a major statement on the national stage to get a chance to go ahead in the Heisman race. Coming up second, though, for key players, it's going to be Maddox Matson, because Ashton Jeanty, it's been shown that you can't just win behind Ashton Jeanty. He is going to be a huge part of winning these games, but you're going to also need the passing game to be a factor. A lot of teams have keyed in on the running game. Boise State has done a pretty good job of stepping up in the passing game. Last week was an exception, and we saw what happened the last time that Maddox Matson had an exception to his game versus Nevada. The next week he came out and had a near-career performance versus San Jose State. And so an opportunity perhaps against Oregon State. Maddox Matson step up, who's played really, really well overall this season. 2,361 yards passing. That's fourth most passing yards out of all Mountain West quarterbacks. 53rd in the country. So he's not like a top 10 elite quarterback, but considering there's 134 FBS teams, he's 53rd in the country for passing. 62.8% completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, one of the lowest in that category in the country, and only 9 sacks. However, he has had 4 sacks in the last 2 games. So the numbers, I mean, again, still low on the national average and definitely an elite stat. However, teams are finding little ways to get to him, and he hasn't looked as comfortable in the pocket. Part of that is some of the offensive line issues Boise State has had with all the injuries and the rotations, but he hasn't looked quite as comfortable in the pocket the last few games. Will Oregon State get a chance to rattle him here? We'll find out. And then the third key player, and I really do apologize for my last preview. I missed the third key player, and I just kind of rolled right into the Oregon State guy. So I'm making sure I get it today. But my third key player, moving over to the defense for Boise State, is going to be Marco Notarani. He has stepped up so big this season. We all knew he was going to have a huge role after stepping in the absence of Schramm last year, and he has done such a great job, especially the last couple of weeks that Simpson has been out. And so he had 51 tackles, 2 passes defended so far this season. He's third on the team in tackles, and while his numbers might not necessarily blow you away, he has had a huge impact, especially the last 2 games versus San Jose State. He had a career high, or a season high, 9 tackles, and versus Wyoming, he had 6 tackles and was almost individually responsible on 2 drives for forcing a punt, including one in the red zone, right near the goal line, where he stopped the running back on a 4th and inches attempt and gave Boise State back the ball. And now moving over to Oregon State, it is a little bit of a different story here when you're talking about their season, and especially about their players, because Boise State's been bit by the injury bug, but Oregon State has really, really suffered from injuries this year. I mean, 9+ players are right now out for them or questionable to return. And so that's really hurt them across the board. But really has hurt them more than anything, even before the injury bug set in, was inconsistent quarterback play. Obviously, they had the transfer from Idaho coming over, Gavion McCoy, and just not working out for him. It's unfortunate to see some players, they just don't make the jump to the FBS level smoothly, and definitely the case for him. He had a great career going at Idaho and just hasn't been able to replicate that at Oregon State. And so they've seen a a rotation at quarterback. And one of the guys that is currently starting for them and has been playing pretty well, but who has not been the primary starter. He's played 3 games so far this season. Right now, though, the guy who beat Washington State is their primary starter coming into Boise State. It's going to be Ben Goldbranson. I'm probably messing up that name. Oregon State fans, please correct me in the comments below. But he has played well in the 3 games. 2 of those were losses, but one of those losses was close. And he has 717 yards passing, 62.6% completion percentage, so comparable there to Maddox Matson. 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That number is not. And then 3 sacks in those 3 games. But last week, I mean, he was the hero for Washington State. 22 of 34, 294 yards passing, 64.7% completion percentage. He did throw 2 picks, but he threw 2 touchdowns. He also had a rushing touchdown. That's not his game. He's not a rushing quarterback, but he can do it in a pinch, and he was able to get Oregon State 3 touchdowns in that game and lead them to a win versus Washington State. However, this is an Oregon State team that has been very run-heavy. Not necessarily by design. They did have 2 really good running backs, as one certain delusional Oregon State commentator said they had 2 Ashton Genties. Quite proven false. Quite definitively proven false throughout the season. However, they did have come to the season with 2 solid running backs, and definitely was an offense that wanted to emphasize the running game, but they've had to go to it more than they wanted to with how poor the quarterback play has been. Now, Ben has stepped up and played well, and the combination of him and Anthony Hankerson is definitely a lethal one. They definitely have the opportunity to hurt some defenses now that you have a little bit more of a competent passing game going. And Anthony's played really well this year. Again, nowhere near to Ashton Genty's numbers, but he's played well, 972 yards rushing for 4.4 yard average and 14 touchdowns. And he's also been a receiving threat for him, which we'll get to his stats here in a second. But he has definitely been the focal point, a workhorse for this program, and he's going to need to have a big game on the national stage if they want a chance to beat Boise State. Now, moving into the third key player here, we're going to move to a wide receiver. Regardless of who's slinging the ball, they're looking for this guy in Trent Walker. 77 passes, 849 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has twice almost the receiving yards of the next closest quote-unquote receiver. So not almost, he actually does have over twice the closest receiving yards. The next closest receiver is a tight end who has 338 yards, and the second leading receiver in receptions, 77 yards like you said for Trent. The second leading receiver in receptions is actually a running back, and Anthony, 25 receptions for 140 yards. So Oregon State, they really don't have a plethora of guys that they can sling the ball around to. It's been a somewhat limited offense, again, limited in part by those injuries that they've experienced. But they're going to need to have at least these 3 guys step up and have a big game. The job on Boise State side is a little bit easier because, again, they don't have a plethora of guys on offense that can get the job done. They are somewhat top-heavy in that area, but Oregon State does have 3 key players here and a couple others, like the tight end that we mentioned, that can definitely hurt you, and Boise State's going to have to be aware of that. Now, moving into the keys to the game for Boise State, the number 1 key for Boise State is take the pressure off the offensive line. This is an offensive line that has been through the absolute ringer. You look at what Ashton Genty has done, the hits that he's taken, the yardage that he's put up, the focal point has been for the offense. Well, it's not like he's just doing that out there by himself. Every hit that he's taking had to, most of the time, he's breaking the second and third level a few times, but every hit that he's taking had to come through an offensive lineman, or he was saved a hit because of an offensive lineman. And Boise State's offensive line has worked so incredibly hard. I have been so impressed by the offensive line performance throughout this whole season. Obviously, earlier on in the year, when everybody was healthy, when you saw an offensive line was one of the best in the entire country, that teams like number 1 teams like Oregon couldn't get past. Boise State looked unstoppable with that offensive line, and of course, injuries have hurt them. And while that offensive line has not looked as dominant the back end of the season, what they have done with the injuries that they have received, I mean, 3 key starters off the offensive line for a good chunk of this year, 6 different rotations coming into last week, and I would expect some different shakeups this week as well, so a 7th rotation likely coming. The amount of rotations, the amount of injuries that this offensive line has taken, and the performance that they have had despite that is mind-blowing. Again, you think back to Boise State teams from even just a couple of years ago, even with all of their starters out there, this was not the type of performance from an offensive line. I said in my last review, even with the struggles from the offensive line versus Wyoming, I would have taken that offensive line over the Boise State offensive lines of 3 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. I would have taken that performance over some of those ones. The performances where Bachmeier was getting hit on every single player. I think it was like the most hit quarterback or second most hit quarterback in the entire country, where we couldn't run the ball efficiently. And that's not the case. Max Matt's has taken a couple of hits, and yeah, Ashton Jeanty's not breaking everyone wide, but we're still running for over 180 yards. Ashton Jeanty's going for over 160 yards individual, and Max Matt's only taking 2 sacks, 3 if you count one that was negated by a penalty. So the offensive line performance, I've been so impressed, but you have to take some of the pressure off of them. They have been. We talked about Ashton Jeanty being the snowplow coming into the season, getting a snowplow named after him by the city of Boise. Yeah, that's great that he has the name, and he's definitely a hard charger. But the truth is that the snow plow, the front of that snow plow is this offensive line. Ashton Jeanty's driving the bus, but the front of that snow plow is this offensive line. They're the ones plowing into the defense, and it's a defense that is doing everything they can to come and stop the run. This is an offensive line that's having to face 9 stacked boxes, 9 men in the box, safety screaming down at them, linebackers cheating up. This has been a offensive line that has had to go through the ringer, and they need something to alleviate the pressure. It will help Ashton Jeanty. It will also help take some of the pressure off of the offensive line itself, or negate some of these injuries. You got guys coming back from injury that haven't played in a while. They're trying to make up for it a little bit. They're out of sync. If you can find ways to take the pressure off of that unit that is starting to show from the blows that it has received, you'll find an opportunity for them to gain some confidence, for the effort that they do have available to be used to its max effort, and opportunities for Ashton Jeanty to get to that next level. So Boise State's got to find ways to take the pressure off the offensive line. It all starts with the deep ball. Boise State has got to establish the deep passing game. I refuse to believe that it is not a facet of their game. All the tape that we have seen from Maddox Madsen even this year, and especially going back to last season, with wide receivers that were on the roster last year and are still on the roster this season, is that he can throw the deep ball, and Boise State's just not going to it. For whatever reason, they are just not making that a priority, and maybe again they're just not getting the looks. But even if it's an incompletion, it's going to be enough to push the defense back. Boise State has got to establish the deep ball in this game if they want to give themselves an opportunity against some of these other programs that are going to continue to focus in on Ashton Jeanty. If you can give them something else to think about, you'll open up more opportunities for yourself. Boise State's got to establish the screens. Boise State's run some screens this year, but it's mostly been the tight ends. I don't think we've ran a single true wide receiver screen all year. I don't know if we haven't run very many running back screens this season. Boise State just hasn't used the screen game effectively. That's a great way to take pressure off of your offensive line. They get to let the defense go, and they can go out and block a secondary player. But that's a great move as a tackle, being able to go out and block someone that you outweigh by maybe 100 pounds, and also forces the defense to not be able to come screaming down at the running back every single play. And then the other thing that we really haven't seen on Boise State is the quick passes to the sideline. And Boise State used that a lot last year with Hamden's offense. We really haven't seen it as a facet of Dirk Cutter's. It's something that teams have been using to defeat Boise State's defense and the rush, those quick passes sideline. We saw, of course, versus San Jose State. We even saw it last week. But Boise State hasn't done that themselves. They have some quick guys. They have some guys that can make a move in the open field. They need to use that more. And then the last element is the option. Again, force your wide receivers outside to do a little bit more work there. Force the ball to the perimeter and make the defense again have to consider the fact that there are other ways you're going to hurt that you can hurt them. Maddox Madsen has clearly shown with his legs that he is a threat. Obviously, we know what Ashton Jeanty can do when he's given some space on the outside. Force the defenders to make a decision, especially against a play calling style they haven't seen a lot of this season and may not be prepared for. Boise State needs to find ways in a variety of packages, everything that I've said, things they're not really doing to bring some pressure off of this offensive line and make their offense a little bit less predictable so far this season. All right, so key number 2 for Boise State is to score quickly. Again, Boise State stubbed their toe on the last 3 games. They have had 2 games where they won by a single possession, and they had a third game where until the fourth quarter it was a single possession. And a big part of the reason that those games have been so close is because they've given opportunities for these other teams to get into the game early. Now, Nevada is an exception, but that's a rivalry game. But San Jose State, Boise State down 14-0. Wyoming, they score first 3-0. Boise State doesn't score until 3:40 in the first quarter for Wyoming, and not till 5:36 in the second for San Jose State. If you allow teams that are backed into their corner, that have nothing left to lose, that are already coming out and playing with everything they've got, if you give them one tiny granular of momentum, they are going to expand that in an exponential way, and you're going to have trouble beating that team. And that's what we've seen the last few weeks. Boise State has got to find a way to come out, capture, and hold on to that momentum. I think it starts with starting fast. The Boise State offenses that we've seen coming out, it's been kind of what we see throughout the whole game. The somewhat slow, methodical approach, the run-heavy offense early on. It's not like you're going to come out and establish the ground game. Every team knows what you're going to come out and put against them. You're not pulling any wool over their eyes, and if anything, you're giving the defense confidence that they can stop the ground game if you're not successful with it, and you're tiring your offensive line out early. Find some ways to do what we said in key number 1, to push them back. Come out fast-paced. I would love to see Boise State come out in the first drive and go no huddle down the field. Just some quick plays, a pre-planned drive where they go down and they have an opportunity to make some big breakaway plays and score early. Find ways to get that momentum and to hold on to that momentum in front of your home crowd, who will, if you give them just an inch, they will hold that momentum for you throughout the entire game. Boise State needs to find a way to fire up this crowd early, to fire up this team early, to take away any opportunities for Oregon State to steal momentum. And then key number 3 is leave no doubt. This is me stealing a phrase from the 2002 season for Boise State, but leave no doubt. Play with confidence. The last 3 weeks, the Boise State team that we've seen has not been one that's been playing with confidence. It's been a team that's, I'm not going to say they've been playing not to lose, but they've been, I had a conversation with Coach Sanford, and he used the term that they've been playing with too much care. They care too much for the players around them, and each player is feeling the pressure of who they're holding up, the team around them, and who they're playing for. And they care so much for each of these players. That's a great attribute to have. It really is. But at a certain point, you have to play loose. You have to play free. You have to play not careless, but carefree. You have to be able to go out and have the high risk, high reward type of plays that allow you to break a defense early, and that are such a key part of the dominant teams that we see, is that the high confidence play style. And for Boise State, this is that opportunity to come out and establish that confidence and to leave no doubt for the team's sake, but also on the national scale. This is one of your few last times to impress the voters, to give yourself that opportunity to cement that 4th highest spot in the CFP and not give the Big 12 a chance to come back. To have an opportunity to impress the Heisman voters for Ashton Genty's sake as well. I mean, this is, again, one of those few opportunities that's probably going to be maybe the most watched game. When you talk about time slots, what Boise State's competing against, this is the prime time game. The day after Turkey Day, day after Thanksgiving, everyone's sitting around, they're eating the leftovers, and they turn on the game, and this is the game. This is the opportunity for Boise State to impress on the national stage, impress the Heisman voters for the Heisman campaign, to impress the CFP voters, to of course impress the fans, but to more than anything else, impress each and every individual member on this team and let them know that they have that confidence. And then at the end of the day, this is your chance to clean sweep the Pac-12, to be the true Pac-12 champions of 2024, and to start off the 2026 season. I might say off of it, but whatever, not this next year, but the year after that, Pac-12, first ever Pac-12 conference with Boise State in it. This is a chance to show your future rivals and establish yourself and show who's boss to start off what should be hopefully a very exciting rivalry series going forward. Again, 3 keys to the game: take the pressure off the offensive line, score quickly, and leave no doubt. So to summarize here at the end, Oregon State, 5-game loss coming into last week, 9+ injuries, an offense that hasn't been able to do anything in the passing game, less than 200 yards average passing, 195.8 yards rushing per game, but it hasn't translated into points, 25.8 points per game. A defense that's been vulnerable against the pass, over 200 yards allowed per game in the pass, been pretty vulnerable against the run as well, 178.2 yards allowed rushing. But then again, it's also a Boise State team that hasn't played well the last 3 games. It's a Boise State team that's giving up over 261.2 yards per game passing. It's a Boise State team that like I said, has struggled the last 3 games. Has definitely been defensively exposed against teams that haven't been great passers. Versus Wyoming is no stalwart of the passing game, and they were beating Boise State deep. It's an Oregon State team that, again, they're not great at passing, but I think they're at least on the level of Wyoming, and that should concern Bronco Nation because Boise State wasn't able to stop the passing game for Wyoming. And I think the running game for Oregon State is a little bit more dangerous than Wyoming. And then, of course, you have the factor that Oregon State just went out and beat Washington State. They have all of this momentum, and they have nothing left to lose, and they have to win this game to get to a bowl. It's their last chance, their last opportunity to do something meaningful with a season that has certainly been filled with disappointment. But, however, Boise State is averaging 49.4 points per game at home. They have scored over 50 plus at home 3 times. And Oregon State on the road has been a different team. They haven't been great at home, but they also have been terrible on the road. Of their 5 losses coming into this week, 3 of those have been on the road. They're 1-4 on the road. Their 1 win on the road being versus San Diego State, which is not really anything to crow over. And they are only averaging 16 points per game on the road. We said 25.9 points per game overall, which isn't great. Less than 3 touchdowns points per game on the road. When a Bronco feels the Wolves closing in, that's when it runs the fastest. And Boise State has had 3 back-to-back games where the Wolves have gotten closer. They can feel them nipping at their heels. And Boise State has a goal at the end of this tunnel that they are so close to. I think you're going to see a Boise State team that shows up and is dominant, that puts on one of their best performances of the season, that reverses their fortunes, that has maybe some other players come back, some key injuries come back for them in this game. And even if they don't, they've now had a couple of these other guys had an opportunity to get a little bit more tested and hardened. It's a Boise State team that is not going to be in a trap environment. They are at home on the blue, where in every game except for 1 game which had a rivalry element to it, a different nature going on. And while I said this is the beginning of a rivalry, it's not a rivalry yet. Boise State wins big at home on the blue. That's just what they do. And I think that they are going to see this as one of their last opportunities to show who they are. This is senior night. There's so much riding on this game. There's too much at stake, and Bronco Nation is going to be with them every single step of the way. They are going to let them know how excited they are to have been part of this season so far, and every fan there is going to embrace being part of Boise State history as Boise State wins 50-23. That is my final score prediction for Boise State versus Oregon. Oregon State. I don't think Oregon State has the offensive capabilities to take full advantage of what Boise State's limits are defensively. I think it's a Boise State offense that does well after a slump games. That's what they've done so far this season. They performed well the following game. I think it's a passing game that comes to life again. I think it's a home crowd that gives them that advantage. And I think it's a Boise State running game that on the national stage, that last opportunity, Ashton Jeanty, even with all the injuries that he's come through, the offensive line and Ashton Jeanty have maybe a career performance, but certainly a Heisman-worthy performance on the blue. That's my final score prediction for Boise State. So again, if you did not put yours in already, please put it in the comments below. I'm excited to have that discussion with each and every one of you. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!